My name is Kyle. Until a few months ago, I thought I had life figured out. I had a job that paid well as an auto dealership finance manager. I had a house in the suburbs with a small backyard and a mortgage I could actually afford. And I had a wife named Jacqueline, whom I had been married to for 5 years. Jacqueline and I met at a friend's birthday party and got married 2 years later. As a married couple, our daily life was simple, and I liked it that way. Jacqueline worked as an account manager at a marketing firm about 20 minutes from our house. She handled client relationships and campaign timelines, which meant her schedule was predictable. She left the house every morning around 7:30, stopped for coffee at the same drive-through near her office, and came home around 6 in the evening. I usually got home a little earlier than she did, so I would start dinner or at least figure out what we were going to eat. On weekends, we kept things low-key. Saturday mornings were for sleeping in and making breakfast together. We would then run errands and take care of things around the house. Sunday was grocery shopping. I never worried about where Jacqueline was or what she was doing when I wasn't around. That thought didn't even cross my mind. If she said she was working late, I believed her. If she said she was going out with a friend, I told her to have fun. I didn't check her phone or ask her questions designed to catch her in a lie. That wasn't the kind of husband I wanted to be, and I didn't think I needed to be. I trusted her because she had never given me a reason not to. We had our problems, sure. Every couple does. Sometimes we get frustrated with each other. We argued about money once or twice, about how much to save versus how much to spend. But none of it ever felt serious. It was a Friday evening in late September. The sun was setting earlier now, and by the time I got home from work around 6:30, the sky was already dark. I changed out of my work clothes, put on a t-shirt and sweatpants, and started thinking about what to make for dinner. It was the evening when you just want to relax and do nothing, maybe order takeout and watch a movie. Jacqueline came home around 7, which was normal for her. I heard her car pull into the driveway, and a minute later, she walked through the front door. She dropped her bag on the kitchen counter the way she always did, kicked off her heels, and let out a long breath like she was exhaling the entire workday. I asked her how things went at the office, and she said it was fine, just busy, nothing unusual. She opened the refrigerator, grabbed a bottle of water, and leaned against the counter while she drank it. That was when she told me about her plans for the evening. She said she was going to visit her friend Anne. According to Jacqueline, Anne had been having a rough time lately and needed some company. I knew who Anne was. She and Jacqueline had been friends since our marriage. Anne was a lawyer at a mid-sized firm that handled corporate contracts and business disputes. She always seemed to have everything under control. I had met her maybe 5 or 6 times over the years, and she had always been polite and easy to talk to. What I also knew about Anne was that her marriage had been falling apart for a long time. She had been married to a guy named Greg, who worked in commercial real estate. From what Jacqueline had told me over the years, the relationship had been rocky almost from the start. They argued constantly, separated twice, and went to couples counseling more than once. A few weeks before that Friday, Jacqueline mentioned that Anne had finally signed the divorce papers. After years of back and forth, it was officially over. Anne was single again, and according to Jacqueline, she wasn't handling it well. She was lonely, second-guessing her decision, and struggling to adjust to living alone in the apartment she had shared with her husband. So when Jacqueline told me she was going to spend the evening with Anne, I didn't think twice about it. It made complete sense. Anne was going through one of the most challenging experiences a person can have, and Jacqueline was a good friend by showing up for her. I told Jacqueline to tell Anne I said hello and that I hoped she was doing okay. Jacqueline smiled and said she would pass along the message. After she finished her water, Jacqueline went upstairs to change. I assumed she was just going to put on something comfortable since she was heading to a friend's apartment to drink wine and talk. But when she came back downstairs about 30 minutes later, I noticed that she had put in more effort than I expected. She was wearing a black dress that I hadn't seen her wear in a while. It fit her well and showed off her figure. Her hair was down and styled with loose curls. Her lips were a darker shade of red than usual. I told her she looked beautiful, because she did. She smiled at me genuinely and walked over to give me a quick kiss on the cheek. She grabbed her purse from the counter, checked her phone briefly, and slipped it into her bag. Then she walked toward the front door. Before she left, she turned around and looked at me. Her hand was already on the doorknob when she said, "Don't wait up for me, okay? If we get too deep into the wine, I'll probably just crash at Anne's place. I don't want to drive home if I've been drinking. I told her that it was smart and that she should be safe. She said she loved me, and I said I loved her too. Then she opened the door, stepped outside, and pulled it shut behind her. I heard her heels clicking on the driveway, then the sound of her car starting, and then she was gone. I stood in the kitchen for a moment after she left, not thinking about anything in particular. I ordered some food outside, watched a basketball game on television, and went to bed around 11. Before I fell asleep, I sent her a text message. I told her I hoped she was having a good night, that I loved her, and that I would see her in the morning. I expected her to reply before she went to sleep. She usually did, but that night there was no response. I didn't think much of it at the time. I figured she was caught up in conversation with Anne or had already fallen asleep. I put my phone on the nightstand, closed my eyes, and drifted off. I had no idea that the life I thought I was living was about to collapse. I had no idea that the woman who had just kissed me goodbye was not going where she said she was going. I had no idea that the next morning would change everything I believed about my marriage, my wife, and the 5 years we had spent together. That Friday night, I fell asleep thinking everything was fine. I was wrong. I woke up the next morning around 6:30, reached for my phone on the nightstand, and checked the screen. The text I had sent her the night before still showed as delivered but not read. There was no reply from her, no missed call, nothing at all. At first, I wasn't worried. I set my phone back down and got out of bed. I walked to the bathroom, splashed some water on my face, and headed downstairs to make coffee. The morning felt normal. The sun was coming through the kitchen window, and the neighborhood was still quiet, as it always was on Saturday mornings. I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat down at the kitchen table. I scrolled through my phone for a while, checking the news and looking at random things on social media. I figured my wife would text me when she woke up, let me know she was on her way home, and we would get ready together for brunch at my parents' house later that day. That was the plan. My mom and dad expected us at 10, and we had never missed one of those brunches in the 5 years we had been married. It was a tradition. Jacqueline knew how much it meant to my mother, and she always made sure we showed up on time. By 7:30, there was still no word from her, no text, no call, nothing. I picked up my phone and typed out another message. I kept it light, trying not to sound like I was checking up on her. I wrote, "Good morning, beautiful. Let me know when you're leaving your friend's place, and I'll start the coffee." I hit send and watched the screen. The message was delivered almost instantly, but it wasn't read. I stared at it for a few seconds, waiting for the status to change, waiting for those 3 little dots to appear showing that she was typing a response. Nothing happened. I set the phone down on the table and tried to stay calm. I felt there was no reason to panic. I drank my coffee slowly and tried to focus on something else, but my eyes kept drifting back to my phone. By 8:15, the calm was starting to crack. I had sent 2 messages, and neither had been read. That wasn't like Jacqueline. She was the kind of person who checked her phone constantly. She woke up with it in her hand most mornings, scrolling through emails and notifications before she even got out of bed. For her to go this long without looking at her phone was unusual, and the longer the silence stretched, the more my mind wandered to places I didn't want it to. At 8:45, I called her. The phone rang once, just a single ring, and then it went straight to voicemail. Her voice came through the speaker, cheerful and familiar, telling me she couldn't come to the phone right now and to leave a message. I didn't leave one. I ended the call and tried again. Same result, 1 ring, then voicemail. That was when the fear started to set in. Jacqueline always had her phone on. Always. Even when she was sleeping, she kept it on the nightstand with the ringer turned up in case there was an emergency. She never let it die because she was paranoid about missing something important. For her phone to go straight to voicemail like that, it had to be either completely dead or turned off on purpose. Neither of those options made sense to me. If her phone had died, she would have borrowed Anne's phone to let me know. If she had turned it off, that would mean she didn't want to be reached, and I couldn't think of any reason for that. My thoughts raced in directions I couldn't control. The idea that Jacqueline might be with someone else didn't even enter my mind. What I was thinking about was much worse. I was thinking about car accidents. I was thinking about her leaving Anne's apartment late at night and deciding to drive home anyway, even though she had been drinking. I was imagining her car wrapped around a telephone pole somewhere on the side of the road. I was imagining her unconscious in a hospital bed with no identification, doctors trying to figure out who she was and how to reach her family. I grabbed my laptop from the living room and opened it on the kitchen table. I searched for local news, typing in phrases like car accident last night and traffic incident near downtown. I scrolled through the results, looking for anything that might explain why my wife hadn't come home and wasn't answering her phone. I found nothing. No accidents, no incidents, no reports of anything unusual. The news was filled with stories about politics, weather, and sports, but there was nothing about a woman in a black dress who hadn't made it home. I set the laptop aside and picked up my phone again. I stared at the screen, hoping to see a notification that would make all of this worry disappear. But the screen was blank. No new messages, no missed calls, just the 2 texts I had sent, both delivered, neither read. I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know whether to call the police, drive to Anne's apartment, or just wait and hope that Jacqueline would walk through the door any minute with a simple explanation for all of this. I was completely unsure of what was happening in my life. By 9:15, I couldn't stand the silence anymore. The worry had grown too loud inside my head, and I needed to do something. I needed answers. I decided to reach out to Anne directly. If Jacqueline was still asleep, or if her phone had died, Anne could wake her up, or at least tell me that everything was okay. That was all I needed, just a simple confirmation that my wife was safe and that I was overreacting for no reason. The problem was that I didn't have Anne's number saved in my phone. I had never needed it before. There had never been a situation where I needed to talk to her. But I remembered something from a few months earlier. Jacqueline's phone had been charging in the bedroom one evening, and she needed to call Anne about something. She had borrowed my phone to make the call. It was a quick conversation, maybe 5 minutes, and I hadn't thought about it since. But now that memory felt like a lifeline. I opened my call log and started scrolling backward. I went through weeks of calls, past numbers I recognized and numbers I didn't, looking for anything that might match the time frame I was thinking of. It took a few minutes, but eventually I found an unfamiliar number from around that time. I wasn't sure it was Anne, but it was my best guess. I didn't have any other options. I couldn't just sit there and wait while my imagination kept getting darker. I typed out a message. I wanted to keep it short and casual because I didn't want to come across as the kind of husband who panics over nothing. I didn't want Anne to think I was controlling or suspicious. I just wanted to know that Jacqueline was okay. I wrote, "Hey, sorry to bother you so early. I can't get a hold of my wife, and I'm getting really worried. Is she awake yet? Just have her call me so I know she's okay." I read the message twice before sending it, making sure it sounded calm and reasonable. Then, I hit send. For a few seconds, nothing happened. The message showed as delivered, and I waited. Then, almost immediately, 3 small dots appeared at the bottom of the conversation. Anne was typing. She had seen my message and was responding right away. I expected her to say something simple, something like, "She's in the shower, I'll tell her to call you," or "We overslept, sorry for scaring you," or "She's fine, she's just hung over." I expected a quick explanation that would make me feel foolish for worrying so much. I expected to laugh about this later, maybe tease Jacqueline about giving me a heart attack because she forgot to charge her phone. But that was not what I got. The message that came through was short, and it took a few seconds for my brain to process what I was reading. Anne wrote, "Hey, I'm confused. Your wife isn't here. I'm actually in Chicago for a work conference this weekend. I haven't seen your wife in weeks. Is everything okay? Call me." I read the message once, then I reread it. Then I read it a third time, slower this time, as if the words might change if I looked at them long enough. But they didn't change. They stayed precisely the same. My wife had told me she was going to Anne's apartment. My wife had said she was spending the night with Anne because Anne was struggling after her divorce. My wife had kissed me on the cheek, told me she loved me, and walked out the door in a black dress, and she had lied to my face about where she was going. Anne wasn't even in the city. Everything my wife had told me the night before was a complete fabrication. It was all a carefully constructed lie designed to give her an entire night away from me without raising any suspicion. The fear I had been carrying all morning didn't go away. It changed. It twisted into something else entirely. For the past 2 hours, I had been worried sick, and now I realized that none of that was real. Nothing bad had happened to Jacqueline. She was fine. She was perfectly fine. She just wasn't where she said she would be. She was somewhere else, with someone she couldn't tell me about, doing something she didn't want me to know. I didn't know what to do or think. If she could lie that easily about where she was going, what else had she lied about? How many other nights had there been? How many other excuses had I believed without question? I didn't respond to Anne's message right away. I couldn't. I was trying to make sense of what was happening. The morning sun was streaming through the kitchen window, and the coffee I had made earlier was getting cold on the counter. Everything around me looked the same as it had an hour ago, but nothing felt the same. Something had broken inside me, something I wasn't sure could ever be put back together, and Jacqueline still hadn't come home. At 10:30, I heard a key slide into the front door lock. The sound cut through the house's silence like a blade. I had been sitting at the kitchen table since I got her friend's message, waiting for her to come home and to see what she would say. The door swung open, and Jacqueline stepped inside. She was carrying a Starbucks cup in one hand, the white and green logo facing outward like a prop in a performance. Her hair was slightly messy, not in the styled way it had been when she left the night before. She dropped her purse by the door and let out a loud, exaggerated sigh. She pressed one hand against her forehead and winced like she was nursing a terrible headache. Then she spoke without looking at me. "Ugh, my head," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. "Anne kept me up half the night talking about Greg and all the drama from the divorce. We went through 2 bottles of wine, maybe 3. I barely got any sleep. I need a shower and about a gallon of water." She started walking toward the hallway that led to the stairs, moving casually, like this was any other Saturday morning. I watched her move across the living room. I didn't say anything at first. My eyes were following her every step. She didn't look at me. She didn't ask how my night was or apologize for not responding to my texts. She didn't acknowledge the worry I must have been feeling or the silence that had stretched between us all morning. She just kept walking, already rehearsing her following line in her head, already thinking about the shower she was going to take to wash away whatever evidence was still clinging to her skin. She was almost out of the room when I finally spoke. I didn't raise my voice to shout, accuse, or demand answers. I just said it plainly, like I was commenting on the weather. "That's funny. Your friend, Anne, texted me." Jacqueline stopped walking, as if someone had pressed a button and shut her down mid-step. She didn't say anything. The silence in the room was so thick I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I let the silence hang there for a moment. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to understand that I already knew. Then I continued. "She's in Chicago," I said. "She's been there since Thursday. She said she hasn't seen you in 3 weeks. Jacqueline turned around slowly. Her face had changed completely. The exhaustion was gone. The theatrical headache had vanished. What replaced it was something raw and unguarded. Her eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted, her skin a shade paler than it had been a moment ago. She looked like someone who had just realized that the careful story she had constructed was falling apart faster than she could hold it together. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something. I could see the gears turning behind her eyes, searching for an excuse, reaching for an explanation, trying to find some combination of words that would undo what I had just said. But nothing came out. She just stood there, frozen in the doorway, her Starbucks cup still in her hand, and her entire body locked in place like she had forgotten how to move. I watched her and didn't look away. I wanted to see exactly how she would react when she realized there was no escape. I wanted to see what she looked like when the mask came off. She tried again. Her lips moved, and a slight sound escaped, something like the beginning of a word, but it collapsed before it became anything meaningful. She swallowed hard. Her free hand moved to her side, then to her hip, like she didn't know what to do with it. She was unraveling in front of me, and there was nothing she could say that would put her back together. I didn't wait for her to find her voice. I didn't want to hear whatever excuse she was going to manufacture. I had already listened to enough lies to last a lifetime, and I wasn't interested in adding another one to the list. I pushed my chair back and stood up from the table. My keys were on the counter near the door, and my jacket was hanging on the hook beside it. I grabbed both without saying a word. I walked toward the front door, passing within a few feet of where Jacqueline was standing. She didn't move. She didn't reach out to stop me. She didn't say my name or beg me to listen. She just stood there, frozen, watching me leave. I didn't look at her as I passed. I couldn't. If I looked at her face one more time, I might have said something I would regret. I might have screamed, cried, or broken something. So I kept my eyes forward and my mouth shut, and I walked out the door. I got in my car and drove to my parents' house. The brunch was still happening later that day. They were expecting both of us, and I showed up alone. When my mother asked where Jacqueline was, I told her she wasn't feeling well, a headache, too much wine the night before. My mother nodded and said she hoped Jacqueline would feel better soon. I smiled and said I was sure she would. Then I sat down at the table with my parents and pretended that everything was fine. I ate eggs, but I couldn't taste them. I laughed at jokes I didn't hear. I made small talk about the weather, my father's golf game, and my mother's plans for the garden. I did all of this while my entire world was burning down inside my chest, and no one at that table had any idea. When brunch was over, I hugged my parents goodbye and drove home. I didn't know what I would find when I got there. I didn't know whether Jacqueline would be waiting with an explanation or would be gone entirely. I didn't know what I was going to say to her or what she was going to tell me. All I knew was that the life I thought I had was over, the marriage I believed in didn't exist, and the woman I had trusted more than anyone in the world had looked me in the eyes and lied without flinching. That was the only truth I had left. When I came back home later that day, Jacqueline was still there. Part of me had expected her to be gone. But that wasn't what happened. When I opened the front door, she was sitting on the couch in the living room, still wearing the same dress from the night before. She hadn't showered. She hadn't changed. She had just been sitting there, waiting for me to return, preparing whatever speech she thought might save her. She stood up the moment I walked in. Her eyes were red and puffy, as if she had been crying, though I couldn't tell whether the tears were real or just another performance. She took a step toward me and started talking before I even had a chance to close the door behind me. "Kyle, please," she said, her voice shaky and desperate. "Just let me explain. It's not what you think. I know it looks that way, but you have to believe me. There's an explanation for all of this." I didn't respond. I walked past her and set my keys on the counter. I took off my jacket and hung it on the hook by the door. I moved slowly and deliberately, not because I was calm, but because I didn't trust myself to speak yet. I could feel the anger simmering just below the surface, and I knew that if I opened my mouth too soon, I would say something I couldn't take back. So I stayed quiet and waited for her to keep talking. She followed me into the kitchen, her words tumbling out one after another like she was afraid of silence. She told me that she hadn't lied. Not really. She said she had gone to see an old friend from work, someone named Rachel, whom I had never met. She said they had gotten dinner together and lost track of time, and by the time she realized how late it was, she had already had too much to drink to drive home. So she crashed at Rachel's apartment instead. She said her phone had died and she didn't have a charger, which was why she couldn't text me back. She said she was sorry for making me worry, but nothing inappropriate had happened. She swore on everything that she was telling the truth. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When she finished, I asked a simple question. "Why did you tell me you were going to Anne's?" Her face flickered. Just for a moment, a fraction of a second, something shifted behind her eyes. Then she recovered and kept going. "I meant to say Rachel," she said quickly. "I must have said Anne by mistake. I was tired when I left, and I just mixed up the names. It was a slip of the tongue. That's all." I shook my head slowly. I didn't believe her, and she knew I didn't. She had specifically mentioned Anne's divorce. She had mentioned that Anne needed company because her marriage had just ended. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. That was a detailed story designed to explain why she would be out late and possibly not come home. You don't accidentally include that many specific details about the wrong person. I pointed this out to her, and Jacqueline hesitated. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked down at the floor, then back up at me, then down again. She was stalling, searching for another explanation, trying to construct another layer of the lie that would make everything fit together. But the pieces didn't fit. They never would. Every time I asked a question, her answers changed. Every time I pressed for a specific detail, she stumbled over her own words. She contradicted herself at least 3 times in the span of 10 minutes. First, her phone was dead. Then it was silent. Then it had run out of battery after she got to Rachel's apartment. First, she had been drinking wine. Then it was cocktails. Then she said she hadn't actually drunk that much, just enough to make her not want to drive. The story kept shifting like sand, rearranging itself to cover whatever hole I had just poked in it. She never admitted to anything directly. Not once during that entire conversation did she say the words I was waiting to hear. She never told me where she had actually been or who she had been with. She just kept insisting that I was misunderstanding the situation. She kept saying that I was jumping to conclusions. She kept asking me to trust her, as if trust could be demanded rather than earned. As if 5 years of marriage entitled her to the benefit of the doubt, even when every piece of evidence pointed in the opposite direction. I didn't yell at her. I was just watching her scramble to hold together a story that was falling apart in real time. And the more I listened, the more I realized something important. I was never going to get the truth from her. She wasn't interested in being honest with me. She wasn't trying to repair the damage she had caused. She was trying to save herself. She was trying to find the right combination of words to make me stop asking questions, to make me accept her version of events, to allow her to escape the consequences of what she had done. Eventually, she stopped trying to explain and started crying, trying to negotiate. She asked me to forgive her. She told me that whatever I thought had happened, we could work through it together. She reached for my hand, and I pulled it away. She started crying again, harder this time, and told me that she loved me. She said she didn't want to lose me. She said she would do anything to make things right. I stood there and listened to all of it. I watched the tears roll down her cheeks. I heard the desperation in her voice, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, not even pity. I didn't know what to say to her. I didn't know how to respond to someone who had looked me in the eyes and lied without hesitation, and who was now asking me to forgive her without ever admitting what she had done. I told her I needed time to think. I told her I couldn't have this conversation right now. Then I walked out of the kitchen, went upstairs to the bedroom, and closed the door behind me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. All I knew was that the woman I had married, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had become a stranger to me, and I wasn't sure if I would ever be able to see her any other way. For the next few weeks, I tried to make things work, because the embarrassment of being divorced was too much to bear. I went to work every day and came home every evening. I sat across from Jacqueline at the dinner table and ate meals that neither of us tasted. I slept in the same bed, though we stayed on opposite sides with a gulf of space between us that felt wider than the mattress itself. I did everything a husband is supposed to do because I thought I owed the marriage that much. 5 years is a long time to spend with someone. I didn't want to throw all of that away without giving it a real chance. I wanted to be sure that I had done everything I could before I walked away. Jacqueline tried too, in her own way. She was gentler than usual. She cooked dinners she knew I liked. She asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. She stopped going out in the evenings and made a point of being home whenever I was home. She brought up the idea of couples counseling more than once, suggesting that maybe a professional could help us work through what had happened. She even found a therapist who specialized in rebuilding trust after infidelity, though she still refused to call it that. She still insisted that nothing physical had happened that night, that it was just a misunderstanding blown out of proportion, that I was punishing her for a crime she hadn't committed. I went along with it for a while. I agreed to try counseling. We sat with a therapist who asked us questions about our relationship and listened to our answers without judgment. Jacqueline talked about how much she loved me and how committed she was to making things right. I talked about how I didn't know if I could ever trust her again. The therapist gave us exercises to try at home, communication techniques, trust-building activities, ways to reconnect emotionally and physically. We tried some of them. Most of them felt hollow. None of them worked. The problem wasn't that I was unwilling to forgive. The problem was that I didn't know what I was forgiving. Jacqueline had never told me the truth about that night. She had given me a dozen different stories, each one contradicting the last, but she had never once sat me down and said, "This is what actually happened." She had never admitted to being with someone else. She had never explained where she had really been, or who she had been with, or why she had felt the need to construct such an elaborate lie. Without that honesty, forgiveness was impossible. I couldn't move past something when I didn't even know what that something was. The more time that passed, the more I realized that the damage went deeper than I had initially understood. It wasn't just about one night. It was about everything that came before and everything that would go after. The lie she told me that Friday evening was so smooth, so effortless, so completely convincing that it made me question every other word she had ever spoken. I started replaying conversations from years ago in my head, looking for cracks and inconsistencies. Had she really been working late all those nights, or was that a lie too? Had her business trips been real, or were they cover stories for something else? When she told me she loved me, did she mean it, or was she just saying what she knew I wanted to hear? That kind of suspicion is exhausting. It eats at you from the inside, slowly at first, then faster and faster until there's nothing left. I found myself checking her phone when she left it on the counter. I found myself driving past her office during my lunch break just to see if her car was in the parking lot. I found myself analyzing every text she sent and every excuse she made, looking for holes, waiting for the next lie to reveal itself. That wasn't the kind of husband I wanted to be. That wasn't the kind of marriage I wanted. But I didn't know how to stop. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was gone, and no amount of counseling or communication exercises would bring it back. About 6 weeks after that Saturday morning, I made my decision. I was sitting alone in the living room late at night, unable to sleep, thinking about the future. I tried to imagine what our life would look like in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. I tried to picture us growing old together, raising children together, building a life that we could both be proud of. But every time I tried to see that future, the image fell apart. All I could see was doubt. All I could feel was suspicion. And I realized that I couldn't spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if the person sleeping next to me was telling the truth. The next morning, I told Jacqueline I wanted a divorce. She didn't take it well. She cried. She begged. She promised that things would be different, that she would do whatever it took to earn back my trust, that we just needed more time. She said that every marriage goes through difficult periods, that giving up now would be a mistake we would both regret. She accused me of being unwilling to fight for us, of taking the easy way out, instead of doing the hard work of rebuilding what we had. She said I was making a decision based on emotion rather than logic, and that I would change my mind once I calmed down. I listened to all of it. I let her say everything she needed to say, and when she was finished, I told her that my decision was final. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just done. The man who had fallen in love with her 7 years ago, who had married her in a vineyard surrounded by friends and family, who had believed that they would be together forever, that man didn't exist anymore. He had died on a Saturday morning in September, sitting at a kitchen table, reading a text message from a woman named Anne. What was left was someone who just wanted to move on with his life, even if that meant moving on alone. The divorce took several months to finalize. There were lawyers to hire, paperwork to file, and assets to divide. We had to decide what to do with the house, which we eventually sold and split the proceeds. We had to go through our belongings and figure out who got what. We had to have conversations about bank accounts, retirement funds, and all the practical details that nobody thinks about when they're saying their vows. It was tedious, exhausting, and sometimes painful, but we got through it. We signed the papers in a conference room downtown, with our lawyers sitting on opposite sides of the table, and just like that, 5 years of marriage came to an end, with a few signatures and a handshake. I moved into an apartment across town. It was smaller than the house, just 1 bedroom and a modest living space. I furnished it slowly, buying things as I needed them, building a new life piece by piece. I didn't date for a long time. I wasn't ready. I needed to figure out who I was outside of that marriage before I could think about being with someone else. I spent a lot of time alone, which was hard at first, but eventually it became peaceful. I focused on my work. Slowly, gradually, I started to feel like myself again. I don't know where Jacqueline is now. I heard from mutual friends that she moved to another city not long after the divorce was finalized, but I don't know the details and don't care to find out. I don't hate her. I don't wish her harm. I just don't have any interest in being part of her life anymore, and I have no desire for her to be part of mine. Some people can stay friends with their exes. I am not one of those people. When something ends the way our marriage ended, the cleanest thing to do is walk away entirely and never look back. What I do know is that I made the right choice. Some things can be forgiven. Some mistakes can be worked through if both people are willing to be honest and do the work. But what Jacqueline did wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. She chose to lie to my face. She decided to construct an alibi that used her best friend's name, She chose to walk out the door looking as if she were going to meet someone special, knowing precisely what she was about to do and what she was hiding from me. That level of deception doesn't happen by accident. It requires planning. It requires intention. It requires looking at the person you trust most in the world and deciding that your secret is more important than their peace of mind. When you realize that the person you married is capable of that kind of betrayal, the marriage is already over. The divorce is just paperwork. The separation is just logistics. The real ending happened long before any of that, in a quiet moment that you didn't even witness, when the person you loved decided that you weren't worth the truth. My name is Kyle, and this is the story of how a single text message told me everything I needed to know.